All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Strengthening Cybersecurity and Post-Acute Care, Training Strategies for Protecting Your Organization. My name is Carrie Rosenberger, and I'm the Director of Marketing here at showdme and your moderator for today's presentation. All right, so before we dive in, I have just a few housekeeping items. So first, a recording of this webinar, along with a copy of the slides, will be sent to all attendees. Second, you can submit your questions for our speakers at any time using the chat feature at the upper right-hand side of your screen. We'll also have a dedicated Q&A at the end of the webinar. And finally, we have a brief exit survey that we'd love for you to take. So with that, let's go ahead and dive into today's presentation. So today I'm joined by Avi Singer, CEO and founder of showdme, an online compliance training service and software provider for post-acute care. I'm also joined by Shloimy Levinger, CEO at SpareEye, a cybersecurity company that aims to mitigate risk for businesses in a straightforward and impactful manner. All right, so looking at today's agenda, today we'll be covering the current state of cybersecurity in healthcare, common cyber attacks and tactics, everyday actions that put providers at risk, and training strategies for safeguarding every employee and your organization. All right, well, with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Avi to kick off our presentation.
Thank you so much, Carrie, and welcome to everyone on our webinar today. I really appreciate you making the time. And it's certainly a critical topic, something that's, of course, top of mind for all of us, whether we are in the healthcare space or whether we run any type of company that has any kind of online presence. We're well aware of some of the cybersecurity challenges that are out there. And why we thought this was particularly important for this audience, and it's great to see that many of you are CEOs, directors, VP level, C-suite people at many healthcare organizations, is because one thing that we became very aware of over the last few months is that sometimes, even though many of you are in senior leadership positions, you may not be aware of the fact that one, you have very, very valuable data for those who are looking for that kind of data. And number two, what the actual risk and impact is. And we thought it'd be really important today to share both of those with you. Number one, why would somebody want to hack you specifically? And number two, what are the consequences of potentially being hacked or having a data breach or things like that? One more reason I want to give just for, specifically in the post-acute space, many of you on this call today are involved with, home care agencies, home health, skilled nursing, ABA, other similar markets. And one thing that we're finding that's really common in this industry is the number of employees who are out in the field using their own devices, using their own email addresses, using their own phone numbers. And that's something we're certainly going to talk about. Shloimy will talk about that a little bit later. So let's just talk for a second here about, what is it that anyone would want from you? So number one, if you're an employer or a healthcare organization, you've got lots of valuable data. You've got social security numbers for your employees. You've got social security numbers for patients. You may have Medicaid ID numbers, medical histories. These things are things that are valuable to aggregate and sell on the market. So there are buyers who want this data, and it's not necessarily those people who are going to take that data from you who are going to be the ones to use it, but they know how to aggregate that information together, and they certainly know how to get paid for it. The consequences to an organization being hacked, having a data breach, being held for ransom are massive. Number one, I've had personal experience with this, not with my company, thank God, but personal experience with friends, downtime. So completely getting shut out of your systems, not able to run your day-to-day functions, no access to email, no access to databases, no access to payroll, no access to bank accounts. So that is a significant risk, and very often the only way you're going to get out of it is, Shloimy will talk about this later, is actually paying for that. Number two, we have a responsibility to our patients, we have a responsibility to their families, we have a responsibility to our employees. And there's a lot that can happen to impact them if, God forbid, their information gets out there. And then as employers, and again, as people in healthcare, we have to understand that there are financial ramifications, there are legal ramifications. So certainly a critical topic, and really happy, one that we got to, we have the opportunity to present it today, and that so many of you have seen this as an important topic to participate in. So why now? Well, number one, because it's happening a lot more often, and I think a lot more than people realize. A recent study that came out from the HIPAA journal, it was that 78% of healthcare organizations have experienced at least one cybersecurity incident in the past 12 months. Now, let's be clear about what that means. It may not mean that your company specifically has had a data breach, has had a cybersecurity incident, but let's face it, we're all working with EMR systems, EHR systems, payroll providers, lots of third-party systems out there. And unfortunately, the reality is that many of them are being attacked on a daily basis. These incidents, again, sometimes we get an email about it, sometimes we get some information. They may not have a significant impact on your day-to-day business, but just realize that in a lot of these incidences, even if they're not having an immediate impact, there's lots of other consequences. You may not be aware of sensitive data that may not be out there that's come directly from you. You may not be aware of the fact that there's patient health information that's now available out there as well. So again, we may not see ourselves within our organizations on a regular basis that's happening, but certainly be aware of the fact that you work with many other software providers out there, with many other companies out there. You'll see this pretty regularly, as you'll see from kind of the next slide. And that is, it's been in the news, right? So I think maybe a couple of years ago we were seeing it every few months. There was some kind of significant data breach or a ransomware kind of attack happening. Finding out that maybe insurance companies that we're involved with or those we're involved with have had some kind of incident, but it's much more prevalent today. It's happening on a monthly basis. You can see it in your personal life. I think probably on a weekly basis or every couple of weeks, I'm getting a letter in the mail or an email address from somebody who's had my private information saying, hey, we've had an attack, we've had your information might be out there. Here are different ways that you can protect your information. So it's certainly something that I think all of us are cognizant of happening in our personal lives, but understand that again in healthcare, it's happening a lot more. And even though many of the incidents seem to be happening with some of the larger national providers or some larger national managed care organizations, it's only a matter of time until it trickles down to every organization, right? So whether you're a skilled nursing facility or an ABA agency or a home care agency, eventually hackers, eventually those who are looking for this data or looking to hold you ransom are going to find or potentially find you as well, right? It's only a matter of time until they start working their way down to even some of the smaller providers out there. So yeah, this is something you need to be aware of. Very costly, lots of liability involved. And really important that one, you're aware of it, and two, you know how to mitigate it and also deal with it. Next slide, please. So before I hand it over to Shloimy to really dig into what's out there, what's happening, how are people being attacked, how can you protect yourself, let's just talk a little bit about how this commonly happens. So number one, finding targets. And just so you know, finding targets is no longer something like people specifically impact the organization. The way to find targets is usually by identifying weaknesses, right? So just simply identifying information that might be out there, information that might be available, and then tracking back from that. So maybe they find an employee, access to an employee's email address because they're using a personal email. And through that, they discover, oh, wow, you work for this large healthcare organization. Now we can find our way to the healthcare organization. So easy to find targets these days, very, very easy to find weaknesses, particularly in the post-acute space. And often they're just using information that may have come from some other list, right? So they found some other list and they're just digging way through. We hear a lot about AI out there, artificial intelligence. This is an industry that's using artificial intelligence aggressively, meaning they're taking millions and millions of points of data, using artificial intelligence to piece together all these different pieces. So access someone's personal information, figuring out that they work for a certain organization, figuring out the value of attacking their organization, and using the information they have about that employee to then go on. Shloimy will talk about phishing attacks and all kinds of other attacks, things that we see commonly. Text messages that seem to be coming from a boss, emails that seem to be coming from your organization, but that's exactly how they get it, and it's really, really easy to get. Next, they'll just pick an attack method, right? So what information do they want from your organization? What's the best way to get it? Look at the most vulnerable people. Again, they're going to be people on the field using personal devices and things like that. Jump into your system, probably even before you'll notice a data breach or there'll be some kind of ransomware attack or like that. They're actually just poking around, Like, what do you have, right? So now they're in your EMR system, now they're in your EHR system, now they're in your payroll system, poking around, seeing what's valuable, deciding what they want to do with it. Hey, do we want to lock the whole thing down? Do we want to just, walk off with this data? But lots of options in terms of what they can do. So again, yeah, I don't want to scare anyone on this call. I'll leave it to Shloimy for that. But this is happening probably already within your organizations on a daily basis. The fact that you may not have been attacked yet, the fact you may not have had a data breach, is probably just a choice by somebody out there. But it's inevitable that the data is out there, and people are able to access it. So just wanted to kind of set things up over here for why I think this is a critical conversation, and what we need to do. We were super fortunate to be introduced to Shloimy a little while back, and he's certainly an expert not only in this area of cybersecurity and the cybersecurity risks out there, but also very familiar with the healthcare space as well as the post-acute space. So very excited to bring him on here and really take over from here in terms of outlining what those risks are, and of course how to mitigate them. So thanks, Shloimy. Thanks so much for joining us, and I'm going to hand it over to you right now.
Sure. First of all, thanks, Avi, for the introduction, as well as for all the information that you shared till now. One thing I do want to bring up is there are many organizations out there. Everyone has a big network, or they have personal devices that they use, as you pointed out, for for their HHAs or CNAs, whatever they have. Um, Hackers don't necessarily look for the biggest fish, because biggest fish could be tougher to fry. What they look is, we call it low-hanging fruit. So we will look for the easiest targets and try to exploit that and see where we can go from there. The average length of an attacker in a network is around 100 to 150 days, where they sit and they try to learn the process, and to see what's the most valuable action. As Avi pointed out, they try to learn and see where they can make the most money. And as a matter of fact, that's the market is. There's two types of markets in the dark web. There's people that do the initial access points, where they break in and then they sell it off to someone that makes the decision if they're going to do ransomware, extortion, or whatever case they decide that may be. There's two types of people, just to point that out. There's one that has been hacked, and then there's one that is going to get hacked, right? So most people know someone in the industry or in their personal life that has been breached, and the consequences that had on them. But if not, here are the top 5 things that I want to talk about, that applies to many other verticals, but especially in healthcare. And this is from what I see personally. The first one is a network. There's a network of computers. There's a network that we work on. There are many reasons why a hacker would want to get into that network. But once they get in and they find something, this can create create havoc and loss of care, loss of data, and have other types of repercussions and um, stuff that you don't want to have. The way they do this is normally and typically will be like exploiting a vulnerability, and this could be in medical devices. What we see is a lot of medical devices are not the most up to date. They don't have a way to do that, and if that happens, God forbid, there can be a disrupt in treatment where patients will not get their care that they need. Right? This can be, we've seen this in ICUs or like places where it is most critical, as well as there's compromised patient data. Not everything is public, and there's laws around it, but from the legal side, we don't want any of our information out there, right? Dirty laundry stays at home, right? It's the same concept. We don't want everything to be out there. So when our network goes down, typically everything will be public. Obviously, this can impact care, as far as obviously treatment, as I said, and there could also be just the internal network, the way we people work with each other. This can be easily mitigated by keeping everything up to date. Yeah, you can continue with the next slide. The second thing I want to talk about is an insider threat. So there's two types of insider threats. There's one is an accidental and one is an intentional. Typically, what I see in my experience, it's usually it's an accidental. It's not something that the user might be aware of. They clicked on a link, they installed something, they saw a free program out there, right, or something, a crack version of something, they install it, and that's basically they're an insider threat. What that means basically is that there is an insider in your organization that has keys to something, right? And now the hacker has an initial access point. right? What this can cause HIPAA breach, where just records getting released. It could cause also loss of data, where we've seen people delete data, right? They come in and just delete stuff. So obviously having backups can prevent that. And then is just selling it, right? So they don't even like disrupt it like with ransomware, but they copy all the data and just sell it to someone else. Next slide. All right, most of the hacks start with social engineering. So everything you post online, right, which is great things. Like I've been at this event, or we're doing anything like we post on LinkedIn, on Instagram, we're giving away information that can be used against us, right? So by having all that information out there, we're just giving people a way to just create common interests, or a reason why we should trust them. So social engineering, the concept behind it is that we trust them in a certain way, or it's giving them a sense of urgency. So the hacker will try to create a sense of urgency, like I'm your boss, and I need gift cards right away. So this is something that's very common, and I need this right now. So it takes away the time of thinking, and if the person would have thought for a second, she would have been like, hey, this doesn't make sense, it doesn't add up. What the hacker tries to do is with AI, this becomes extremely easy, just scanning through an Instagram account, Facebook account, or just browsing the internet and just creating a very brief summary of who they're targeting and what should be the best way to do that. The way they do this is attackers pose as legitimate sources, right? They try to like company leadership. Extremely common right now is like people posing as HR, and they're trying to recruit people on LinkedIn and stuff like that, where they're trying to gain trust from there. It could be from an IT staff or a brand or a vendor that you deal with, right? Please update my ACH payment, right? This is something also very common over there. And this can be in the form of an email, a phone call, or text message. There's actually different methods for all of these, but phone calls is also now with AI. It's becoming extremely common, where people are getting scammed. It's copying the voice of the victims. Then this is something that is very not commonly secured, and it's something that I do want to point out is we all have we call it BYOD, which is bring your own devices. Most in our field of in healthcare, we have people that, we're not giving out laptops for everyone or phones, or we even allow them to, like we do give out, but we allow them to use their own devices. What this and what this adds up as a security vulnerability is, and a risk factor is, we have a bunch of like people with access to our network, right? They VPN into our network, so they have a laptop that has credentials that are saved, or they have just emails on it, and when they lose a device, it takes a second to bypass it, give it to me, and I'll get into it in no time. And it's not just me, anybody. Um, this poses as a huge threat. So what this ends up happening is we need to have like policies in place and software in place in order to be able to mitigate and prevent this from happening. So the threat of this is, obviously it would expose potential data to unauthorized individuals, in a sense of, there's a laptop that has trusted privileges and now it's out there in the public, right? And it's unsecured data. So all someone has to do is just either remove or copy the data that's already downloaded on there and just release it to the public. And the mitigation process is start with policy in your organization and then have a way to enforce that, right? So if we enforce a BYOD policy, we should be able to delete and wipe a person's device if that gets lost and stolen. However, we still have to train the employee to let us know if such a case occurs, right? Where they lost a device, now we have to know about it. The next slide is about ransomware. Ransomware is something that when this happens, we will know about it. So this could be after a long period of time. This could be about 100 or 150 days later, once they already got the initial access, or it could be randomly. Someone got an email, and we'll show that in the next slide. But basically, we have a way to deploy a malware that will encrypt the whole network. And when this happens, we cannot work. This disrupts the healthcare operations, patient care, and obviously it will have a damage on your reputation, and will lead to significant financial losses and legal ramifications, because we do, from as part of like from a HIPAA standpoint, we have to protect the confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Ransomware like ruins most of this, right? We will not be able to continue and work off that. And we've seen this from a bunch of large organizations as well, where it happened in one, and I want to use like Change Healthcare as an example, where they had, Optum, like one of their companies got hit. They had to take it down and offline as part of their mitigation plan, but this disrupted so many organizations that are still struggling with that, right? So in order to protect from this, obviously, is backups, but again, we need to test our backups to make sure that that is working. But when this happens, typically they will ask for ransomware, and the way they determine how much the ransomware will be on what the value is. So as your organization has some sort of value to them, either with more data points or your downtime costs you more. So those factors get factored in into those ransomware negotiations. Here I want to talk about like there's just the ransomware in action, the way it works. So here it's just a quick demo of it. So let's say Tracy, she got an email with a file, right? And it could be from someone she trusts. The second she clicks on it, it will pop up such a box, which basically just is a program that encrypts everything. So as you see on the right side, everything renders useless. We cannot open any file unless we pay for the ransomware. There's no way around it. There's no way we can do this. This specific one is WannaCry. WannaCry, I mean, is already like there are solutions for it, but as hackers progress, they're actually advancing their malware in it like 100 times more than we can actually protect and crack it. All right, next slide.
Thanks so much. And I'll take it back from here. But I mean, it's kind of scary when you think about it, right? An email with a file in it that seems to have come from someone's manager or someone from HR. You'll click on it and that's it, right? Now your company's held for ransom. And I'll never forget the first time I found out about this was a number of years ago. A friend called me and he said, "Do you have access to Bitcoin?" And I said, "Why do you need Bitcoin?" And he said, "Oh, my company was held ransom, and it was actually $5 million. Very large healthcare organization. They ended up paying it, and just needed to get Bitcoin in order to pay it." So that was the first time and I remember asking him, "How did it happen?" It was exactly like that. Just an innocuous email that came through. Someone clicked, someone downloaded something, and next thing you know, everything was shut down. So we figured now would be a good time to throw a poll out there. It'd be great to know about those of you on this call today. Are you aware of these things? Are you currently offering training to your employees beyond HIPAA? So of course, everyone offers HIPAA training. That's important. But are you including your HIPAA training, cybersecurity training in order to mitigate a number of the things we've talked about so far today? We'll give it.
Actually,
Go ahead.
I do want to point out a thing over here. Like, so part of HIPAA training usually will include something, but cybersecurity training takes it a bit farther. And we want to test it, right? So, like, a lot of people have trainings where they send out a video or they have like a person speaking. We need to test that, right? Where we send out fake emails. We have an organization that we currently service. Like, the first time we did a test where we sent out fake emails, we had a 30% click rate, which is pretty bad because you have to remember it takes one person to just wreak havoc in a network. But luckily, like as time progressed, we lowered the click rate, and now it's significantly lower. Um, it's something that more like you have to keep on pushing and promoting education for.
That's great. Excellent. All right. We've closed up the poll, and it looks like about 70%. Wow. 70% of the people on this call do not currently offer any type of cybersecurity or cyber risk training above their HIPAA training. So certainly something that people should be aware of. Before we move on to the next part, I'll just highlight here that showdme is a training organization. This is something we take very seriously and have started to develop actually an extensive course library focused on cybersecurity and the various risks that are out there. Let's move on to the next slide. I think we've done a good job of scaring everyone, Shloimy, in terms of all the things that could happen. So let's try to help people now. Let's see what can we do to help organizations who might be at risk or have encountered some kind of issue.
Right, exactly. So there's a few must-ask questions that every organization should always ask, right? Is over here I pointed out one example is what happens if we get ransomware on our network, right? What would it be? Could we quantify our downtime, our risk of care, reputational concern? Could we see and put numbers to it to see what it would cost and how we would respond to that? Do we have an incident response plan? Many organizations, what I've seen, have an incident response plan. However, they've never practiced it. So when something does happen, it's irrelevant. They have no idea what they're doing, right? And then the legal repercussions, like a lot of organizations already have. I'm not sure who and who doesn't, but it have like a legal team to deal with incidents. So in case something happens, they know who to talk to, when to go to. Like they're as part of HIPAA, right? We have to like if there's more than 500 records, we have to like go to the media. We have to like report it. There's a whole process for it. Do we know what we have to do? And that should be always practiced on. Another thing is what third-party vendors are reliant on, right? So example over here, it would be, let's say, Change, right? So many organizations did not realize how much they rely on a specific vendor. Now, not always could we have a different vendor to move to, but if we know of how much we rely on someone for our business, like, and the impacts it may have, we can start having a plan for it to see if, God forbid, something happens, how would we, continue our operations? So obviously, like take evaluation of third parties, and have we conducted a third-party audit on our cybersecurity strategy, right? So many organizations have their internal IT or an MSP that they use, and they feel very confident. They haven't had a breach that they've noticed in, I don't know, 18 years, right? Everything is great, everything works perfectly. That doesn't mean that it's not going to happen going forward. And have you ever audited? Have you have a third party, right? So think of when someone amputates a leg, right? They go to a party just to hear a second opinion, right? They want to hear like, should they do it? Should they not? Is there a different method? Same idea, right? You have your internal parties doing their um, the best they can. We just want to make sure that you have like bring in someone that doesn't have any reason to just brush things away, as well as like having a backup system. We call it, if you have a backup that has never been tested, you don't have a backup, right? So what I've seen, I've been part of many incident responses, actually in healthcare, where organizations were like, okay, cool, we have a backup, right? It's not a big deal. Like we'll be up and running in no time, right? Turns out the backup did not work, it failed, or it did not back up the critical things that they thought that it would do, right? And it's not been tested. Another thing to think about is if you have an organization with 100 devices, right? 100 computers or more, it can take you 2 weeks to put back that network on, to rebuild that. It takes a lot of time to build a network and just bring it back to life. And so, yes, you have backups, but it will take you a long time to just bring things back up to speed. Next slide is about cyber insurance. So many organizations think, and when I come in, they're all like, cyber insurance, I feel comfortable already, right? Cyber will cover everything. So first of all, ensure that you have cyber insurance to begin with. So a lot of people have that in their initial like GL, PL, right, where they have um, their cyber policies included over there. So just double check and make sure that you have an active, specific cybersecurity insurance. And next is ensure that you have the right amount of coverage because every organization will have a different cost for downtime, right? Like not all organizations are created equal. So having a specific unique use case or specific need, ensure that you have the proper coverage for that. The next is obviously insurance companies will always request information about your security posture and your maturity level. This will make a difference in the premium, obviously, and how much you're paying. So the more security you have and the more you're audited and the more processes you have, the less your premium costs. However, be as accurate as possible, right? And failure accuracy represent the controls you have in place will result in a denial of service of your claim. So think of when an organization does get hit by ransomware or wire fraud, whatever the case may be. Um, the insurance company will bring in their best team, or their A team, to do an investigation to see what happened, how did this happen, and they will see everything that you wrote on your document, initial to get your premium, and they will see exactly, did you have a firewall? Was it up to date? Do you have patch management in place? right? Do you do trainings or not? They will see everything. And if you did not, do everything according to what you said, you may be denial. You may have a denial on your claim, as well as you might have to pay for their A team, right? And they're expensive. So, I've seen that as well. Another good idea, just a quick tip, is run your current policy by another broker, right? You could pay another broker just a few $100 just to give you an honest opinion on like, hey, do I have enough coverage? Do you think you can do better? And it's just a great idea to, hear a fresh viewpoint on it.
Excellent, Shloimy. Thank you so much for that. And actually, it's interesting. We were just reviewing my company, showdme's cyber insurance recently, and there's actually two. I wasn't even aware of that. There was one for accidental, so data leaks, so things that happen by accident, and then there was another one for people for actual attacks, right? So lots of information, lots of new information coming out there, and again, for organizations like those on this call today, it would make a lot of sense to sit down with your insurance brokers, understand what that coverage is, what does it cover, how does it cover. So really appreciate that, Shloimy. So just to sort of wrap things up over here, I think these are some questions we have to ask ourselves. And gauge the level of confidence that we have about our employee knowledge on these things. Again, I work with many organizations out there, probably many of you on this call today, and we know, some of our employees may not be the most sophisticated when it comes to technology and technology usage. And there's some basic things that already, as I mentioned, can mitigate a lot of the risks. So number one, are we just gently reminding them about don't click on anything, unless you're very confident about what it is. So, something looks enticing, it looks exciting, they're really liable to do that. Not understanding the value in having or changing passwords. We know it's frustrating, systems ask you to change passwords every 90 days or 6 months or whatever. There's a reason for that, and super important. The other one is that I think is important is, recognizing signs that an email might not be from the source you believe it's from, right? So, you can't really prevent people from downloading things. If HR says download and sign this, they're going to download and sign it. But how do they know it's from HR? How do they know it's from the organization itself? I'm not going to go through all the ones over here, but there's the bottom one I think is the most important. It's just a lack of awareness. Unfortunately, I think the statistic that we had up there before was 3.5 billion phishing emails are coming out, and that's just emails. Regarding never mind text message and WhatsApp messages and all kinds of other messages. The number one thing you can do is create awareness around for your employees who are out in the field around the risks, with their own devices, the risk with connecting with certain networks and things like that. And the reason why you need to be the one to tell them this is not because of their data being at risk, it's because of your data being at risk, right? We can certainly guide our employees about how to be careful about their own data, but most importantly, we're trying to protect ourselves, our organizations, and make sure that no one's accessing our data and our information, holding us ransom, based on the fact that it got through, to us through one of our employees. And finally, I think we're getting to the point where that's not enough. So it's not just awareness is not enough. I think, to Shloimy's, example before, I think it's very important for organizations these days to start testing these things out, right? Start sending out phishing emails. There's organizations you can work with. I'm sure you can talk to Shloimy and I'll put you in the right direction. Test out what's your baseline right now. If we sent out a phishing email, how many people would click on it? Would it be 10%, 15%, 20%? I think you'd be surprised by how many would click on it. And then start working off of that, right? And have different baselines that you can have, on reducing people's tendency to click on those links, reducing risk. But the number one thing you want to do today is try to figure out where are we today, how secure are we, send something out to hundreds of employees, see what happens with it. I know that this is something I work on very closely with our employees. I will tell you, I would say almost once a week or once every 2 weeks, an employee will reach out to me and say, did this come from you? There's just something suspicious about a text message, a message through our internal messaging system. We use something called Slack, maybe an email, but it's so prevalent and so common. I appreciate that when they're reaching out and saying, and sometimes it is, right? Sometimes maybe I just misspelled a word or something like that and they picked up on that. But it's super important to have employees, on top of their game, getting what's out there, getting what the risks are, and not being afraid to ask an additional question. Forward you the email, forward you the text message, say, hey, is this from you? Is this something you sent over? There's nothing wrong with that. It just means that they're being careful about protecting your information. So I think we're at the point right now where every single employer works for organization is part of that defense mechanism. As much as we can put all kinds of firewalls and things in place, it's really the employees are going to save us from a lot of the headache down the road. So now that we've reached the end of the presentation, we want to open it up to the audience here for any questions you might have for myself or for Shloimy. We'll give a few minutes here for questions, and then we'll wrap things up.
All right, so we do have our first question that has already come in. So on BYOD, so bring your own devices, in most cases, users do not want to install anything on their personal computers or devices, but they have access to, our Gmail or our Outlook. What can we do to manage this?
All right, so I'll take this, Avi.
Sure.
Right, so BYOD is actually a very it's a whole world on how to mitigate it and how to address it, and it's going to be on the use case specifically in how we could like compromise, right? Find something in between that will work for the organization and work for the person as well. But there are methods that we can do to mitigate risks that we can, for example, on most emails, like if you're using Microsoft, you could have conditional access, which will be great if you give them BYOD access. So what conditional access basically does is it will not allow someone from Brazil logging into a New York resident's email, right? So yes, we allow them to use their own emails, but we put a control in place to mitigate that risk a little bit. So I'm just giving you one example of like how it can be mitigated, but we have to find a balance in between. Or if it's possible for the organization to give out a company device, we can do that as well, right? Where you give them a device where it's company owned, and if we want to lock it down, we could just like at the click of a button, IT could just like disable it, right? And so that would be the best, but it's obviously there's a cost factor to it.
All right, and then just a reminder, you can continue to put your questions in the chat and question feature on the right-hand side of your screen. But our next question coming in, Avi, you can start with this one, but they're looking for what are specific topics that we should be covering in our training for our healthcare workers when it comes to cybersecurity.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's a lot of them. So my advice on something like this is don't do it all at once, right? As much as we want to secure everything tomorrow, and sometimes our idea is throw everything in there right now and put them through the training and everything. I think the best method around something like this is going to be consistent, ongoing training, right? So you might want to start with something around general awareness, right? Hey, are you aware of the fact that by using your own device or by using your own email, things like that, you might putting yourself at risk, might put the organization at risk. And then over time, really start to dig into some of the specific ones. So maybe have a short course on phishing as one example. Maybe another course on the risks of leaving your device out in the open or accessing unsecured Wi-Fi networks, as enticing as they might seem, when you're trying to use your phone in a public place. So I think there's a lot of topics. And I think sometimes it may even be overwhelming. But my guidance for most organizations would be: don't think of this as a one-time event. It's not a checkbox item. This is not a compliance item. Sometimes you think of HIPAA and OSHA and things like that, like check the box. DOH is happy, DOL is happy, or CMS is happy, everyone's happy. This is something where you want to have a real strategy around it, and you really want to build it out over time, and also have methods for testing it.
I would also add on that point, Avi, great point, but you could have different types of trainings. There are general risks for general people, but then there's also, let's say, finance. They send right AP, they send checks, right? They send out, they should have a specific training that is cut out for them, right? We have to like drill down to the threats that they have. And by the way, when we do a risk assessment, we always ask the people that head these organizations, like the HR department, we ask them, what are the risks that you see that keep you up at night? You'll find that many times they will tell you things that they feel like they're lacking on, and that's a great start, right? To see where they're the least comfortable at.
Excellent.
Great. All right, I think we have time for probably one last question here. but how often can we conduct cybersecurity training for our employees? And Shlomi, you started to touch on this a little bit too. What should we be thinking about as we're looking at programs of how we can tailor it between, kind of to your example, someone in finance versus, maybe an administrator or an HHA out in the field?
Right. So this is actually something like it's very interesting because a lot of people think, yeah, let's train every day. There should be a new video out there. But in reality, what we see that is over time, like people stop looking at those emails and it just becomes useless. So I think creating, at least this is just my opinion on it, is twice a year where you have an official training. It could be a live demo, and those are the most effective. And then throughout the year, here and there, as things emerge, right? There's something in the news, have that like circulate a video. But throughout the year, aside from actual training videos or educational newsletters or events, do occasionally send out phishing emails. It shouldn't be consistent like every 2 weeks or every month. It can't. It shouldn't be like expected, but should be randomly like sprinkle it over the year and see how it works, right? See how they're responding. If you see a spike in click rate, like people are clicking more, that is an indication that you need more training already, right? But if you see it gradually going down, that means congratulations, you made some progress.
Yeah, and I would just add, I think this is one of those topics where you want to keep it, I think, short and to Shlomi's point, consistent, right? So, the training itself can be a couple of minutes. I don't think it has to be very extensive. I think it's just something you can send out, once a month, short, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, sometimes maybe a document or things like that. But I think the other point's much more important is, there's a really great way, and this is one of the ones where you can actually get a good sense of your organization's compliance with protecting in data and things like that. So, I wouldn't just look at training as the solution here, but also to Shami's point about real testing, right? And I think that's the ultimate goal is, create that baseline today, start figuring out your campaign for how are we going to address, where are we today in terms of, people's compliance, and then start doing the training and see if it adjusts, and hopefully it does, and it gets better over time. And if it doesn't, then keep thinking about it. But this is an ongoing thing, and I think again, I would say the last thing is find those experts out there, where you're in touch with them on a regular basis. You're getting their newsletters, their emails. They're letting you know what's out there. There's new stuff all the time that's out there, and you want to be on top of it as well. So it's not just training for the employees, but the organization itself needs information and knowledge in order to be able to continue to fight these issues.
All right, great. And then I'm going to put you both on the spot a little bit here, but in a few sentences, what do you think is the biggest takeaway everybody should have as they walk away from this presentation today? Avi, we'll start with you.
I think the biggest one is not thinking that you're not vulnerable, right? Not thinking that, well, who knows about me or who's aware of us or anything like that. I think people are, I hear often, I'm sure Slim hears a lot more, people are shocked by why they may have been targeted. And it's not necessarily because you're a big name brand. They're not going after always the big name brands or the big name organizations. It's simply because your information was out there. And that's why you were chosen to be attacked. So recognize that everyone here on this call, everyone is at risk every single day. It's not going to be because of the revenue that you have. Again, that might be an interest level that they may have in sort of pursuing it, but realize that everyone here is at risk, and it's really important to be thoughtful about how to deal with that.
All right, my thoughts on this is two things, points on it. Is number one is don't get too comfortable, right? Like, yeah, it's been working till now. I'm okay. Everything's working fine. And number two is don't become a pill pusher, right? Don't accept like yes, there's a software out there that will be like install this and we're all good. There's a human factor in it. The human is probably the biggest line of defense that we have to address, right? We could have software protecting us. We could have everything. At the end of the day, if an HR person just clicks on an item or any person in the organization, we're at risk. So focus on the people because the people or organizations are the most important things to focus on.
All right, I think those are both great things to walk away with from this presentation today. So we're going to go ahead and wrap up here, but I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. Thank you to Avi and Shlomi for all the information that you shared today. Um, what's next, right? So what's coming up next? Well, as I previously mentioned, we'll send out an on-demand version of this webinar to all our attendees today. And as a bonus, we'll also be sending you our cyber safety cheat sheet. So this is a printable list of do's and don'ts that you can hand to your caregivers and employees with some of the quick reminders of how they can effectively reduce the risk of cyber attacks. We also have some great new content coming up, so be on the lookout for our upcoming guide, Training Strategies that Enhance Quality of Care. And then also look out for our next webinar coming this summer, The Impact of Training on Employee Satisfaction and Company Culture. All right, so I just want to extend one last thank you to all of you for joining us today. I hope you have a great afternoon and a wonderful rest of the week.
Thanks so much. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you. Bye.